Hey folks, JR. Back for another episode of Fallen Badge. This one's going to concern the shooting death of Lieutenant Ronald Oliver. Occurred on August 5th, 1981 at 3275 Thomas at the Wendy's in Memphis, Tennessee. The following information came from the court records, specifically the appellate court. Now, the only thing I am not 100% sure on at this moment is, did the main action occur on the north parking lot? I believe it did. And that's what we're going to operate from at this point. Obviously, if something comes up, I will put it out there and let you know if the north parking lot was not the correct location for the main action. On August 5th, 1981, at approximately 10 p.m., the defendant entered the Wendy's restaurant on Thomas just before the store closed. He purchased food at the counter, and he remained in the restaurant until it closed. The defendant then pulled a gun and escorted the employees and one customer into the manager's office, where he demanded that the manager hand over the day's receipts, which was approximately $1,100. The defendant received the money in a bank bag. He then took the employees' car keys and told all the employees to remain in the office, locked the door, and he left. Now, during the robbery, the defendant, Phillip Workman, had told the employees that he had an accomplice. He told the employees to stay in the office, implying that his accomplice would shoot them if they tried to leave. Now, unknown to the defendant, one of the employees had tripped the silent hold-up alarm. In Memphis, they're known as the Cobra hold-up alarm. Lieutenant Ronald Oliver, Memphis Police Department, arrived on the scene, and I do believe he pulled up on the north side of the store. He met the defendant as the defendant was getting ready to leave the store. At that point, the defendant told Lieutenant Oliver he was an employee. So the defendant and Lieutenant Oliver walked out of the restaurant together. Then the defendant broke away from Lieutenant Oliver and began to run. Now, a second officer had made the scene. Aubrey Stoddard had made the scene by then. Him and Lieutenant Oliver grabbed the defendant. Then the defendant broke free again. He fired one shot, hitting Lieutenant Oliver in the chest. Specifically, the round hit Lieutenant Oliver left side, traversed his body, hitting his heart and both lungs, and then exited on the right side. And he shot Officer Stoddard in the arm. And as he's running, he fires a second shot at Officer Stoddard and then began running back southwest behind the auto parts store, which is located on the south side of the Wendy's. Now, at this time, Officer Steve Parker, North Precinct, he pulled up on the south side of the store, got out of his car, and the defendant fired shots at Officer Parker before he hits the woods. Memphis police officers sealed off the area behind the Wendy's and auto parts store, and after a search of the area using canine dogs, they were able to locate the defendant and take him into custody. They also recovered the .45 caliber pistol that he was armed with. the defendant freely confessed to committing the robbery and to shooting both Lieutenant Oliver and Officer Stoddard. He was positively identified by the employees and customer inside the Wendy's as the man responsible for robbing the business. Now, after many appeals of his conviction for murder and perpetration of a robbery, Phillip Workman was executed at Riverbend Maximum Security Prison in Nashville, Tennessee in 2007. Now, this case garnered a lot of attention. Phillip Workman, through his many appeals, which is not uncommon for a defendant. Most defendants appeal to every level of the court they can for any and all things that they can think of that might lower their sentence. In this particular case, he's just trying to beat the death penalty. But the one issue that came up through these appeals was the claim that his shot did not hit Lieutenant Oliver, kill him. In fact, that Lieutenant Oliver was actually hit by friendly fire, that Officer Stoddard round from his pistol, his .38, was actually the one that killed Lieutenant Oliver. There's even an appeal that mentioned the fact that Steve Parker, the officer who is armed with a shotgun, there's even a claim that Steve Parker had fired a round from the shotgun and one of the buckshot pellets, had hit Lieutenant Oliver. And that was responsible for the death of Lieutenant Oliver. For those of you who follow the Echoes of Shannon Street case file that I put out weekly, you'll know that Steve Parker was one of the officers that made the scene at Shannon Street a year and a half later. This homicide occurred in the North Precinct, same precinct that the Shannon Street incident occurred in. Now, regarding the gunshot, the claim was, and these are from experts hired by the defense, because the medical examiner, O.C. Smith, was pretty adamant that Phillip Workman, it was his pistol that was responsible for the death of Lieutenant Oliver. But the defense experts are claiming that the round that went into Lieutenant Oliver, the diameter of the hole on entry and then the diameter of the hole on exit were either the same, or the exit hole was actually smaller than the entrance wound. Now, the reason they bring that up is because Workman was armed with a .45 caliber pistol. .45, the round, I would think in almost every case, the exit wound is going to be larger than the entrance wound. And that's with a lot of weapons. It's like that. The exit wound will be bigger. But that's their main contention, amongst other contentions that they made. Now, of course, the question that arises from this is when you have a death resulting from in this particular case, a robbery, the death of any person would fall on the head of the defendant. Now, we'll never know what a jury would have said, because the jury convicted him. These appeals, the jury never got to hear this. But under state law in Tennessee, Workman still could have been convicted of Lieutenant Oliver's death, whether Lieutenant Oliver was accidentally killed by friendly fire or by Workman's own hand. Whether you agree with that or not, that's what the law says, that he's responsible because he committed a robbery, and during that robbery someone died. In this case, it was Lieutenant Ronald Oliver. End of watch, Wednesday, August 5th, 1981, Memphis, Tennessee.